The real choice Israelis and Palestinians face today is not between two states and one state. It's between permanent apartheid and or ethnic cleansing on the one hand, and some equitable outcome on the other, whether it's one state with full equality, two states, or confederation. Pretending otherwise distracts from the horrific immediate reality that is still unfolding before our eyes, providing a smokescreen for more horror ahead. Let's just review what has transpired over the past 2 years. Early in 2023, many of us warned in writing of increasingly dangerous hopelessness in the West Bank and Gaza after more than half a century of occupation with no end in sight. Increasingly, human rights organizations, as well as scholars, including me, saw the reality in Israel-Palestine as a one-state reality that is apartheid or akin to apartheid. The rise of a far-right Israeli government that opposes relinquishing control of the occupied territories, with some known to advocate for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, was a recipe for an explosion like we had never seen before. In fact, in March 2023, I wrote with colleagues in Foreign Affairs, quote, "Palestine is not a state in waiting, and Israel is not a democratic state incidentally occupying Palestinian territory. All the territory west of the Jordan River has long constituted a single state under Israeli rule, where the land and the people are subject to radically different legal regimes, and Palestinians are permanently treated as a lower caste. One state controls the entry and exit of people and goods, oversees security, and has the capacity to impose its decisions, laws, and policies on millions of people without their consent," unquote. In April of 2023, I worried that Biden's actions on Israel-Palestine, shielding Israeli settlements in the UN, not fulfilling his pledges during the campaign to reverse Trump's steps, and prioritizing normalization of Israeli-Arab relations over the pressing Palestinian-Israeli peace needs, could stoke more violence instead of limiting it. In fact, I wrote, quote, "The inevitable outcome is that on the Palestinian side, those advocating nonviolence will lose ground as despair increases, and those advocating military resistance will gain ground. On the Israeli side, the empowerment of the militant far right and the its ascendance into positions of power promises more violence, which they appear to seek in pursuit of the, quote, the lost war." I warned that, quote, "the coming collapse into violence will be like nothing we have seen before. The clock is ticking," unquote. That was in April 2023. Then came Hamas's horrific attack that killed nearly 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, including about 35 children, and took 250 hostages in what much of the world saw as war crimes, with Hamas leaders sought by the International Criminal Court for their deeds. Israel then launched an assault in Gaza that has obliterated the Strip, killing over 70,000 people, likely much more, mostly civilians, including over 20,000 children, while destroying the infrastructure, including almost everything standing, while creating in the process 2 million refugees in what much of the world saw as genocide, including major human rights organizations, genocide scholars, half of all Americans, according to polls, and majorities of young Americans and Democrats. Arrest of Israeli leaders was also sought by the ICC for their actions. Even as the ceasefire mediated by the Trump administration took effect, the killing and destruction has not stopped, with several hundred Palestinians killed and dozens of remaining structures destroyed since the ceasefire took effect. International organizations continue to warn of a dire humanitarian crisis. And in the West Bank, settler violence against vulnerable Palestinian civilians, sometimes accompanied by Israeli troops, has escalated in a campaign dubbed by Senator Chris Van Hollen as, quote, slow ethnic cleansing, unquote. Israel now holds over 9,000 Palestinian prisoners, including over 1,200 held without charges, as well as about 350 children. This is the current reality, with Israeli ministers making clear that their vision for Israel is one of Jewish supremacy, that whatever words they employ, such as, quote, transfer or, quote, voluntary displacement, the objective is clearly ethnic cleansing. Certainly, it's neither one state with full equality nor two states that's on offer. Our intellectual and policy energies should thus go toward preventing further humanitarian disaster, toward protecting the rights of the helpless and vulnerable, and holding Israelis and Palestinians responsible for atrocities accountable, while building hope for a path toward any outcome that equally guards the rights of Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs, whatever political form it takes. Personally, I have no preference other than assuring equality for all. The exact form is up to Israelis and Palestinians. That's why before and after October 2023, I have focused my thoughts and writing less on lecturing Israelis and Palestinians and more on appealing to our own American government that has allowed itself to be part of the problem instead of being part of the solution over the decades. The U.S. is not a bystander. It has been an enabler of the awful reality in Israel-Palestine. Even before 2023, the entrenchment of the Israeli expansionist project, symbolized only partly by the Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank, could not have taken place without extraordinary American support, military and economic, but especially in shielding Israel from the reach of international law and the UN and other arenas. Even worse, instead of allowing international organizations to hold the parties accountable for their severe and repeated violations, including war crimes, U.S. administrations have instead taken actions against those organizations, such as the International Criminal Court, further eroding the global order. In the process, the sense of entitlement among the Israeli right has been bolstered, and with it, increasing Israeli public support for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. In the emerging new world, the very sense of international law and order, which had served, at least theoretically, as a reference point for what is permissible, what is just, what is equitable, is now being challenged. This should be the starting point of conversation, honestly. It's far bigger than the question about the viability of a theoretical two-state solution. If we cannot even stop Israeli settler violence against vulnerable Palestinian civilians, let alone settlement expansion, how can we possibly be expected to do what it takes to bring about two states? If we are unable to do what's required to prevent the killing of 20,000 children before our own eyes, how can anyone trust an American promise of a future Palestinian state that might take more than a decade or two? For these reasons, my position has been that our policy should focus less on the specific political form that an equitable outcome in Israel-Palestine will take, whether that's two states or one state, and more on using the full force of American resources to take a firm position against any steps that are inequitable. We should focus less on a future we cannot fully control and more on the things that we can do and must do now to save lives, defend core values, and guard what's left of the international legal order.